No, I think it's really clever. I remember interviewing Brendan Kearns, who's been on the podcast as well. Uh, and when he was working at Envision, he said someone sent in their portfolio as an Envision prototype. And so he said that was really, really cool because it's like they're showing that they can use the tool, they're showing their passion for the tool, and they're doing something a bit more clever rather than your generic, free project portfolio website, or like the typical screenshots of the mobile and a desktop version of an app or whatever that you're working on. That after a while, for people looking at CVs and whatnot, they start to become blind to the actual visual. So when you actually do something interesting, it captivates the audience. And as communicators in design, you have to tell a story with your work. You can't just go with like screenshots on a website, which, by the way, my own portfolio website, which I haven't updated in about 10 years, is exactly that. It's thumbnails on a website. That worked once upon a time when responsive web design was a novelty. But today there's an expectation to be a bit more interested and above and beyond that. So showing passion showing passion is one thing that will always work well in an interview or job prospect situation. And I think whether you do a portfolio in InVision or whether you do like a Spotify styled thing. I remember years ago as well. Do you remember Pantone color charts?
Yeah.
Pantone colors for prints. Yeah. One of my friends, he actually designed his CV like one of those Pantone colors. So it's like each part of his career was one of the tabs, because it was very expensive to produce. So he'd only send it to companies he definitely wanted to work at. But it always got him a callback, whether he got the job or not, like guaranteed. Because designers really appreciate this kind of like novelty thing, and they'll keep it on their desk indefinitely because it's like a cool corporate toy, right? Like, because it's like, oh, look at the CV, it becomes like a thing.
Let me ask you this: if you were in the interviewee, like if you were looking to hire someone on your team, and someone sent a resume that had like the Spotify or the InVision or the other examples we've been talking about, would you like overlook the fact they had maybe like a lower GPA in school, or they had other red flags, like they jumped around between jobs and they didn't have they weren't at a company for 1 year straight, or even stuff like typos? Like, would you forgive them for the creativity of it, or does that stuff cancel each other out?
No, I mean, you judge things on their individual merit. So like you might mark them for like, interesting and sort of uniqueness of their CV, but like attention to detail is like, if that's like a metric that you're looking at, that's covered lots of things. So like spelling mistakes, they can happen, but if it's throughout a CV or throughout a thing, then you think, we do have spell check. Like Grammarly, I pay for, right? And I'm dyslexic, so I always copy and paste text now, and I always find things which I've done wrong. Like even just the spelling of a word looks similar to another word, so the spell check hasn't caught it, but the Grammarly's like actually caught it out and says, oh no, I don't think you mean this word, you mean this one, although they're very similar. I think, again, the more time you take spending on doing something, the better it is. And as a designer, your job is to communicate. My CV's probably got loads, my resume's got probably loads of mistakes in it. But yeah, no, just like resume design in general, the other thing you have to think about is how you have to design resumes at how recruiters think and work, and also how designers think and work. So, and they're two different audiences. So typically if you've got like a generic Google Doc or Windows Doc resume, you always put like a very brief description at the top, a highlight summary of your skill set, like the tools that you use and whatever, and sort of like keywords, because this is what recruiters will look for, and then go straight into your current role. Again, one thing which I really stands out is when people put impact numbers. I was the designer for, I don't know, Spotify, and we implemented blah blah blah, and as a result we saw an uplift of blah blah blah. Like, you're giving key things that, not just I work here and I'm a visual designer and I do prototyping. Well, that's the assumption that you can do that anyway, right? That to me is like a bar. But what did you achieve? For some agency type work, it may be the case where you just say, oh, we worked on X, and you list out some of the clients, so Toyota or Nescafe or whatever. And then again, really bullet points so people can skim read it. Because remember, as we've spoken in a previous podcast, there's research has shown most people are skim readers rather than methodical readers. You might have a bit more detail for folks, and the way you design it is that main thing, bullet points and a bit more information, but people can actually scan each section. Then at the end, you put your education and maybe personal interests, because some people really like to see that. Okay, you volunteer for something, or you're into pottery or whatever, But yeah, and I think, going back to your question, it all matters, right? It all matters, and so get someone to read it. I used to get folks to read my CV, like different people, as much as possible, for spell checking errors. In terms of like if people have jumped around a lot, I mean, there's so many reasons why that is. You've got sickness, or you've got like family life issues that have meant people have to move. So I don't really worry about that too much. If someone's like 20 years in and they've only worked 3 months in every single company, that might be an interesting thing. But then they may be a contractor all those years, and they don't want to be full time, and now they want to go full time.
Right.
But then the first question I would ask them is, yeah, exactly. So the first one is, are you ready to go full time? Because are you able to, because contracting is a very different mentality. It's like smash and grab rather than a long term thing.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I've never heard that. That's funny. Yeah,
I think it's a gaming reference from StarCraft. That's why it's like smash and grab the resources rather than cultivate. I think sales say that it's like, are you a gatherer or hunter? Which means, do you cultivate a relationship over a long period of time for a bigger win, or do you just grab
what you can,
the hunter as what you can and eat that day?
Gosh, yeah, it's an accurate metaphor. No, I tend to agree. Those are just like some common pitfalls. But if I just summarize like everything we've kind of talked about, it's like, adding data, numbers to basically justify the work that you've done, so you can focus on the impact, I think is huge. Doing something that helps you stand out. That's like design or formatting your resume in some particular way to make it, attractive to everyone who's looking at it. Using the keywords that the job posting has is also something that, we kind of like hinted at. That always is like a good best practice. And then, as you mentioned, I think one of the easiest things to do is just like run it by a bunch of friends or people that like can give you like feedback, because chances are it's like little tweaks that ultimately make it way better. Because I think a lot of people actually get a first version that's pretty solid, but it's the little tweaks, adding more data points, cutting stuff down, making it not feel bloated with like a bunch of buzzwords is also really tricky to do. But those are some general.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Design Huddle. The opinions expressed are solely our own and do not express the views or opinions of our employer.